Hi and welcome to RC Modders, and this is the third in the series of videos which I'm doing converting the Bruder A60H Volvo to hobby grade radio control. Typically in these series the first part is going to be an unboxing and first thoughts while I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do. The second video I've been titling it Teaser, where when I first got the thing to work I will try to upload a video to show people how it works and generate some interest for the following videos. The third one in the series, which I titled Prototype, which is this one, is where I explain how I did the conversion, and then the full detailed build videos will follow on from this. I have been extremely pleased with the way that this one operates, and my chief 8-year-old tester thinks that this one is absolutely brilliant. The only thing which I'll be changing on it is I think that I will put slower, higher geared motors on the front, and at the moment the gear ratio is 1 to 200. I think that 1 to 100 is probably going to be a better ratio, and that's what this will eventually end up with. Those looking closely will probably notice that I've only driven the front wheels, and to be quite honest, in this basic version of the conversion, which I'm calling the budget build, I think that that is sufficient. I expect that I will do an upgraded version further down the line where I actually power all 6 wheels. I'm quite pleased with the lift mechanism. However, it is limited in terms of how much it can lift, and in the upgraded version I expect that I'll be putting something in more substantial. But I think that as it is, I think that what we've got here is a very good first or second build for somebody wanting to get into converting Bruder toys. Okay, on with the main substance of this video. The first thing that I want to do is just show you the operation. So I've mounted a switch on the front here which is wired into the speed controller. So the first thing to do is to turn on the truck like so, and then turn on the radio. Okay, so that's all ready to go. So for the steering I put it on the right stick here because I found that having both the throttle and the steering on one stick made it actually quite difficult to control. So we've got the steering over here, and the up and down doesn't do anything at all. So it doesn't matter where this stick is in terms of that direction there. But the steering, you can see how it's operating, and in terms of what's going on here in the middle, you can't actually see anything different from the original model. For the throttle, forwards is there and backwards is there, and what I've done is I've put the lifting mechanism, which is actually an Actuonics linear servo, onto one of the switches at the top with 3 positions. So in the first position it goes that far, and in the second position it goes the rest of the way. This is actually further than the original model went, and nothing stays in here when you do that. Now the first thing that a person's going to need to do when they get one of these is take the front apart. It's pretty easy to get the rear assembly off, and that's fairly obvious, and that will all be covered in the detailed build, but I just thought I'd show you how to get the front apart very, very easily. So underneath you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tabs, and each of those you need to bend those back, and when you look inside it's fairly obvious, in order that the locking pieces are out of the way. 5 of these I've actually already done and left them unlocked. When I put the model back together again, I actually like to have these rear 2 reinstated, so I'll just pop those open. There's a little hole in the tab which allows you to get a screwdriver in there. You really need a slightly larger screwdriver to bend back the tab. That's that. If it does break, it's not the end of the world, but because I'm actually using these to hold the rear together when it's operating, it's better for me if those are left intact. Having released all 7 of those tabs, you flip the model up the other way, and it's literally a matter of unplugging the steps, and the steps pull out sideways. There's that side, and there's this side here, and just pull them out of the way, and then it's just a matter of applying some sensible leverage. And I put my thumbs on top of the back area here, my fingers underneath the top step on each side. It sounds a bit clicky, but that's okay. There you go, it actually comes apart. For those who've been wondering, this is what the inside looks like. And before I turn the radio control off, I'll just show you the steering mechanism in action. So what we have is we have a rod attached to the rear area there, powerful 20 kilogram servo here, and that connected via a small rod. So when we want to steer, and I'll just keep the thing level, hopefully you can see what's going on there. And by having this arrangement, I was actually able to keep in the dummy cylinders so that the model actually looks as it did when it was designed by Bruder. Inside we have a couple of 1-inch motors with the gearboxes on the end. As I said, I think a 1:100 ratio will be more sensible than these 1:200 ratios. I'm going to have to wait till those turn up in the post before I do that. And then we have some 1-inch aluminium right angle pieces which I use to mount the servo. The servo needs to be mounted very, very solidly. Over here we have the speed controller and the switch, and I actually dismantled an old radio control transmitter and took out the charging socket so that I can actually charge the model up without taking the top off, like so, and just plugging that into a normal charger. The battery is a 3700 milliamp 7.2 volt hump pack, and these you can get from Component Shop. I'll just take that out for a minute. It needs to be tied down, otherwise it will be rattling around inside. And that is actually a really nice fit. I dare say you could put a standard 6-cell flat pack in, but this just seemed to fit really nicely. I'll just flip it over a moment so that you can see what the motor mounting looks like from the other side. I had to do some fairly careful carving to be able to mount the motors in here without having to use a tube. One of the benefits was I was actually able to give myself some slightly positive camber, and I quite like the angle of the wheels like this. In terms of attaching the wheels, it's my usual method, and if I just get the side with the grub screw, which I think is there, and this is just a brass 5/8 bolt with a 4mm copper tube sleeving it. You can see here that the motors are actually mounted in place using a piece of 3mm plastic card. However, they are actually held firmly by the fact that I filed out the plastic here to exactly the right shape. In the build video, I'll be showing you the method of how I got that exactly right and how I managed to keep the tyres central to the wheel well. Removing the whole rear assembly is actually really easy. Just unplug the lead to the linear servo for lifting the back, undo one M3 machine bolt, and the whole thing just comes apart. The piece of aluminium rod here actually came off an old wind chime which was hanging outside, or maybe it was a dream catcher or something, but I cut a slot in it, mounted it on this piece of plastic here, glued it thoroughly, drilled and tacked a bolt which I put through. This has remained very solid and I'm quite happy with this method. Moving on to the linear servo, in order to get the leverage to be able to lift this, and as I say, it can't lift a massive amount, but it can lift a reasonable amount, I actually had to get this linear servo as low as possible, hence the fact that I put a bracket on there. I'll just open it up so that you can see what I did on the inside. Okay, so you can probably see that I've done plenty of carving in various areas in order to make room for this, and the actual servo is just attached at the top here. In the build video I'll be showing you exactly how to get this in precisely the right place using a very simple method. Underneath I've managed to retain most of the Bruder suspension, which is something which I really like. However, one important thing which I did do was I made sure that the left and right wheels were each independent from each other. And in order to do that I had to cut each of the axles, and you can see the slot there where I actually put the saw through, and collars each side, and then a piece of tube which was the same inner diameter as the axles. Because of where the linear actuator goes, I had to trim off the end of the suspension link there, and that's just held in place with a couple of cable ties, but I made sure that we've still got the same range of movement as it had in the first place. I've hardly had to alter the top part of the cab at all. There's just a bit of filing which I did here and here in order to make room for the pieces of aluminium which I mounted the servo to. Well, for those who are dying to know how I did it, I hope I've answered a lot of your questions here. And for those who are hoping to follow the build series, I hope you can see that this isn't going to be a tremendously difficult build. You need to be quite accurate, but actually no specialist tools whatsoever are required. I really hope you've enjoyed this video and you found it interesting and instructive. This is probably the last video which I'm going to do before Christmas. So I'd like to wish everybody a very happy Christmas and thank all of those who've subscribed to the channel, provided comments and given me thumbs up to encourage me while I've been doing these. Please keep those comments and questions coming. You may be interested to know that there is a new Facebook group which has been created to discuss these builds. I'll put a link to that in the description, and in the description also, when I get a chance, I will put a full list of the parts and links to where you can get those parts ahead of the build. Once again, as ever, thank you very much for watching.